It was your fault. Okay, great. Well, I'm happy that we survived our fire alarm. You got your coffee, right? Unfortunately, Levi didn't have it. It's all because of the coffee, right? All right. Well, let's get to work. We actually have a number of things that we need to talk about today. So today, as I mentioned before our fire alarm went off, is going to be all about rendering. And most importantly from this conversation, the approach that we need to take and the considerations that we need to kind of keep in mind are going to influence our ability to craft a really great picture. Because as a not so subtle reminder, we're fundamentally in the business of 2D, not 3D, right? The end of the day, we're producing photographs, okay? So this is absolutely one of those moments where we have to put on our photographer's hat and really consider how the rendering engine is directly responsible for crafting the picture that we're creating, okay? So a couple of these ideas you've heard me talk about in our previous conversation about rendering, but I'm going to add in a couple new layers to this that will hopefully help you start to decode how Modo is going to be drawing these pictures. And going back to our kind of conversation about Maya earlier, these ideas are universal ideas. If I was to open up the Arnold rendering engine, which is what you're going to find in Maya in the spring, I would go through the exact same sequence. The thinking is identical, just the implementation of those thoughts with the technology and the tools is really what's going to shift. Okay? So let me show you an idea here of where we're going. I actually showed this to you earlier in the semester, this cool little fan, right? I showed you this, the fan? Yeah. So we're going to look a little bit more in depth at this fan. Okay? The lighting plays a huge, huge part in our understanding of the model itself. And in creating the lighting and the rendering components, it helps us understand the model more directly, the scene more directly, and it helps our audience understand the focal point, okay? Because remember, in picture making, it's all about creating a focal point. There's got to be a purpose, a context for this photograph, right? You just don't take photographs to take photographs, although sometimes you do, which drives me crazy. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people just randomly like holding down the image capture button on their cell phone, like doing this. And it's like, what are you doing? You don't even know what you're doing. You're just generating data. That's all you're doing. You're not taking a picture. You're just hoping a good picture is captured, right? Well, we don't hope and pray in the world of 3D graphics. We're strategic. We create, okay? So this, on the surface, this seems like an okay render, right? It's an okay render. It's actually not an okay render. It's actually a horrible render, okay? And let's look at some of the reasons why this is not a really great place to begin. Artistically, there are some big, big problems with my little fan here, okay? And I made this fan a couple years ago. In that moment, I was exploring the pipeline between Modo and Substance Painter, because I really wanted to see specifically how all of this data was going to get exchanged and how I could use this new texturing tool set to give me, what I was looking for. And so after I finished making the fan, I was like, well, I need to make a cool portfolio image out of it. So I started crafting. I made a table and a cool little set for my fan to live in. And then I used that as an opportunity to show my advanced class and you guys some ideas about rendering that I hope that you take to heart. So artistically, the fan looks good, but the lighting that supports the fan and the composition of the shot is really quite bad, okay? One of the things that traditional photographers often do when they start taking photographs of something is that they consider the active light sources within inside the scene, and they motivate them, okay? Specifically, the active light source in the scene itself is this gigantic window over here in the background. If you look very, very carefully, look at the shadows coming in, being created by the wall and the curtains. The light, and if you look, you can kind of see it here at the windowsill. The light is actually it is. We have some shadow problems, but the light is actually coming in through the window. Okay? So if the light is coming in through the window, a table that is generally close to the window should be getting some direct illumination from that light source. Okay? Directly, if you look at the fan, we're kind of doing the opposite of that. Where's the light the brightest in this version? Yeah, on the screen right side, the exact opposite side of where the sunlight's coming in. So that is a big time problem for us, okay? We've broken the illusion just by having the brightest part of the fan on the wrong side, okay? These little details, and actually these are not little details, these are huge details, need to be considered. This is all an illusion, okay? What's cool is that we get to control the illusion, and we need to control the illusion. So we need to motivate the light coming in from outside the house and have the screen left side of the fan accept some of that direct illumination from the sunlight. Okay? We also want to have, if you look very carefully, the base is probably most indicative of this idea. We also want to have some changes in total value. If you go back in time, about a month ago, we talked about our 3-point lighting setup very directly. And those ideas we're going to revisit here in a second. However, we need to, we don't want to have the light be evenly lit. We want to have some shifts in value. Now, what do those shifts in value present to us as artists? Why do we even do it? Say again? Mood, absolutely, right. The contrast ratio between the different value shifts help establish the mood very directly. If this side is in darkness and the other side is in pure brightness, it's going to feel very kind of crunchy, right? The tension is going to be there because there's a lot unseen inside of the image itself. When everything is evenly lit here, we're showing the audience everything, and it feels very flat, right? There's no sort of drama, depth in the scene itself, okay? So we want to try to find a lighting setup or the placement of our lights in a way that allows us to craft some changes in tonal value. Right now, this is so evenly lit that it's ugly, right? There is no visual interest on the fan that creates a focal point in the scene itself. So we have and the background. I can't speak highly enough about the background, or poorly enough about the background, okay? If you look very carefully, I had to go in and make a little small room model here. And if you look very carefully, this taupey green wall that we have in the background is kind of the exact same color throughout every single part of the frame itself, right? This isn't real. We're losing some artistic realism by having it just be one solid shade of color. So I want to go in with my lighting setup and continue to refine the background to maybe introduce some secondary hues in there to break up that solid field of green and make some visual interest, which will also create some depth. It also gives us an opportunity in doing so to kind of infuse maybe the suggestion of another light source, okay? We don't have to motivate and see all of our lights. They can be off screen, but we should start to see the effect of those off-screen lights on the renders themselves, okay? So let's go jump back over into Modo real fast and take a look at how we can build this. And we have a goal, and this is what it looks like, the animation itself. Small little camera move on there as well. I put camera moves on everything, even if it's a simple little portfolio piece like this. Put a camera move on there. It is 1,000% more interesting when there's a simple little camera move. So hopefully our goal is to go from this, which is ugly, broken, and a really poor lighting setup, into something that ultimately looks like this. Okay, this is the goal. This is the target between them. Now we have some light rays coming through the window, which are pretty cool. These are called volumetrics, and I'm going to show you how to enable those on your renders today. We also can see that we have the correct value changes going across the fan itself. We've motivated the sunlight coming through the window, so it makes sense that this part of our fan be brighter than its opposite side, okay? In addition, it's hard to see on this projector, but I also have a light just off frame here. You can't see the actual light source itself, but I'm suggesting that maybe there is a lamp or maybe a ceiling lamp inside the room there that's casting some glow on the upper right-hand corner of my wall. It's also illuminating the wonderful texture that I placed on the wall and starting to break up that gigantic field of green, okay? So this is the goal. We're trying to get to something that has a little bit more drama in it, that has a little bit more depth, okay? If you look at this image, and I'll do this. Here, I got an idea. Let's just park the playhead on frame 1 on both of these, okay? Is this frame 1? Okay. Literally the exact same frame, okay? Which one looks more interesting? Which one grabs your attention? Yeah, absolutely, right? It's like noon, maybe. Yeah. By having some bright parts in the scene and some dark parts in the scene, we're creating the illusion of depth quite wonderfully. Over here, because everything is so evenly lit, it flattens the image, and it creates a really kind of horrible piece of artwork. Okay? So let's jump back over to Modo real fast and take a look at the actual project file. And we can start working with this. Okay? All right. So here is the final lighting setup inside of Modo, right? So this is where we end. Okay? However, being the Julia child that I am, look what's cooking. All right. Here's where we're going to begin. Blackness. Okay? I've stripped out all the lights in that scene file because I want you guys to watch me individually place all of these lights and understand the purpose and the role for each one of these lights. Because every light should have a role. It needs to be doing something very specifically. Okay? Now, how I got to complete darkness here. The first thing that I always want everyone to do whenever you're rendering anything in the computer, I've selected my render item. Let's go over to the global illumination section and turn this off. Okay? With it on, and I've turned off everything here. Let me just activate my backgrounds. Okay, with the global illumination system on, this is what it's going to look like. Okay? Now, on the surface, the indirect illumination system is a helper, right? But it's a bad helper, and it's something that we want to consider at the very end, the conclusion of our rendering sequence. Things are going to get really dark, so I apologize for turning off all the lights. So on the surface, you're probably thinking, Pat, this is rad. It's already looking pretty good. It's looking pretty photorealistic. And I say, thank you. Okay, it's not bad, but this is not where we want to begin. There is a difference between direct lighting and indirect lighting. Direct lights are point lights, spotlights, directional lights. They are items in our item list that are physically firing off a whole bunch of light rays into our three-dimensional universe. Okay, those are direct lights, and we want to use our direct lights as much as we can because they're always going to give us a very strong result. And they're generally going to be really fast to render, okay? The inverse of that is indirect lighting, okay? And that's found in the global illumination section of our render properties, of our render items. So global illumination, this section right here. So it's defaulted by on, and you guys are used to seeing that gray gradient show up in the background of your scene. We want to walk as far away from that gray gradient as we can. Gray is ugly, and it's going to wash out all of your colors inside of your scene, okay? So we want to turn off its influence, and we want to turn off its visibility. So the first thing that I always do, and this is regardless, it does not matter one bit as to what I'm rendering, I always turn off my global illumination, right? Your indirect illumination or global illumination system is going to take a long time to render, okay? All right, so I'm in the render item, and with that selected, you can go over to your properties panel, and I'm looking in the global illumination section. All right, so what we're getting here is actually some reflections of our environment itself, because, you know, in all honesty, so here's my room, okay, in all honesty, yep, it's not a very complete room. It's only got 3 walls. So the reflections that we're getting on the fan itself are a direct result to the room being open, okay? So here's what I always like to do. I really like to turn off the influence of our environment entirely. So I actually have 2 of them. There we go. And now, darkness. I like this. Okay, this is the place to begin. Because now we'll be able to see quite directly the impact of each one of our lights and understand what each light is doing inside of our scene. So let's start in the background. All good paintings start in the background, work our way to the foreground.
I'm trying to follow that. How did you get total darkness?
Total darkness. So turn off indirect illumination.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're not going to see total darkness unless you have something blocking out the
The other thing you want to do in the environment, just turn off the visibility of all of your environment items. Okay. Not only you got to turn off the images, but also the material. And I also don't have any lights in my scene as well. It's just there's really nothing illuminating my scene right now. I've turned everything off.
You invisible the camera and all that?
No. So if you open up the environment, okay, I have an image and I have a material itself. I fundamentally have turned the visibility of each one of these off. The little eyeball icon. Yeah. Everything goes off. All right, so let's start with the background. All good paintings begin in the background, and then we walk our way towards the foreground. Okay. Now for the background, I definitely want to start looking at how I can get those sun rays coming in through the window. Okay. That's a big part of the scene. The sun is going to be outside, so it makes sense to start there. And we'll see how the positioning and the placement of this directional light will have an influence on our render. Okay. So in my item list, add item, lights, and I'm just going to add in a directional light. And now that I have a directional light in my scene, we can start to understand its immediate role on the render itself. Clearly, the positioning of this directional light is not correct. Okay, so let's get this working. Now, the location of our directional lights don't matter all that much, but the rotation qualities do. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so now I'm being creative here. I'm trying to figure out how I want my light to be illuminating my scene itself. So specifically what I'm doing here and what I'm looking for is a nice kind of shadow property. Yeah, now we're talking. Ooh. So I'm looking at the shadows on the wall there. And I'm exploring how this is going to work. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's pretty cool. If you look at what's going on, yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, we're getting some nice highlights coming into the window. It's still generally pretty dark. I'm digging this. This is a great place to begin. After I place the light, the first thing that I immediately need to do is change its color. Why? Yeah, I like that. It helps us figure out the role of each one of these lights visually. Bingo. There's no such thing as a white light. It's physically impossible in our universe, at least, to have white light. And hopefully maybe some alternate parallel universe, there's white light. But in ours, no bueno. It's not going to work, right? So let's change the color. Now, when it comes to light color, the developers down at the Foundry have done us a solid. And the Moto color picker does a great job of communicating color temperature. Because if we were to go outside and kind of record the intensity of all lights with a light meter, you're going to get a number that's in Kelvin. It's the actual temperature of the light rays being emitted from that source. And we have a cool little place, a little popover menu here. It's a great place to begin. And let's just choose daylit sky. 6,000 degree Kelvin. And now it's boom, it's yellow, right? If we compare and contrast, here's it with it white, and here is what it looks like when it's yellow. Just slightly yellow. It's not orange like an incandescent bulb or a candle, but it's just ever so slightly yellow, which is what we're after, okay? Point being, not white, right? Not white at all. So with this light placed inside the scene, we can start looking at how maybe we can start generating some of the light rays coming in through the window. Okay? Those are called volumetric effects. And they're pretty neat and easy to create. I actually enjoy how easy it is to work with these volumetrics inside of Moto. If I have my directional light selected, check it out. It's way over here in the light properties, down towards the bottom, under volumetrics. Okay? And simply, we're just going to turn it on. Pretty amazing, right? My simple little shaft of light coming in through the scene. Now we have some adjustments because I don't want that looks like a flashlight. I want it to be a little bit more of or have a prominent role inside the 3D scene, and that's where the radius comes in. There's really two channels or two values that we need to affect when it comes to volumetrics: the height and the radius. The radius is going to determine the overall diameter of the light kind of volume, if you will. Okay, so let's double it. Let's put this at 1 meter. That's bigger. I like it. Let's put it at 5 meters. Oh, boom! Now we're talking. It may be a little too big, but that's okay for what we're doing today. The cool thing about volumetrics is if you look very, very carefully here, we're actually creating some really interesting shadows. This is a preview. This is a low quality preview, by the way, okay? We're actually getting some shadows from the geometry in the window blocking the light rays. So it really is true three-dimensional volumetric effects when it comes to lights, which is pretty rad. I enjoy it. As I mentioned just a second ago, this is all preview render stuff, okay? So if we do a full quality render, a lot of the graininess of our volumetrics are going to go away. But man, they do take a long time to render, okay? So it gets a whole lot better when you render it. Now, one of the things that is kind of a barrier for us right now is understanding the impact of all of these new items and maybe the changes to our shader tree on the render itself. And I hate having to sit and wait for a render to cook just to see what a change looks like, right? Have you guys run into that problem yourselves? It's like you make a change and you're like, what does it look? I don't want to wait 20 minutes just to see what this one little section is, right? Well, here's today's pro tip of the day: render regions. Okay, I'm going to abort my render here real fast because I just want to get a good indication of how some of the light rays are going to work. Okay, check it out. Under the Compare Region and Options section of your render window, we have a series of options here called Render Regions. Okay, so I'm going to enable Use Render Regions and then immediately hit Edit Render Regions. And I'm going to get this little box inside of my screen. And this box is interactive. And what we're doing here is that we're defining the area of the frame that we want Moto to render. Okay, and it's only going to render that one little section. It's not going to try to render the entire image.
I don't have that tab on my.
It's in the render window.
I am in the window.
Okay, so if you're not seeing this section, hit the space bar. It should pop in and out. Did that solve it?
No.
Now, it may be dependent on where your cursor.
No, it's not that window I'm not seeing. I don't see the option you chose to get there, where you went up there.
Yeah, okay, let's see if we can figure this out. So it's called the render window. So if you go to render, open render window. There we go. Yeah. All right, now for some, no. Now let's do this. Can you put your, see how on this part there's like that kind of dotted bar? That's it. That's the little shelf. And you may,
Why is it gone?
I don't know, I've had this happen to me one other time. Put your cursor right there on it, then hit the space bar. See what happens. Nada. I've run into this problem one other time as well. Okay, let me see if I can figure out a solution. Because it's this little dotted bar. This is kind of like the divider that makes it large or small. Let's see if I can reproduce the bug that Meredith has run into. Because now, yeah, well, mine's kind of popping in and out. But I have seen it not do that before. Meredith, can you put your cursor here on the dotted line and then drag that way?
I tried dragging both ways and
And it's not working? Okay. Yeah, another thing you could try real fast, on the PC, I'm not entirely sure if it's in the exact same layout section, but you could, well, the render window isn't a layout, but you could try restoring. Just do that? Okay, cool. That didn't work, huh? Yeah, I have run into that problem before. I was like, what is going on? Why isn't it opening it up? Is this lock thumb dragging or divider dragging enabled? Oh, okay. I don't know that. I'm sorry. Okay.
I don't know why my light source is so big. It won't go back down no matter what I do.
Say again?
My light source is massive and it won't go back down no matter what I do.
Your light source is massive. It's just rendering white.
Yeah, but then if I go, let's see, where's my light source? Okay, directional light. Where's my, what's this?
You're in groups. Uh-oh.
Looks like mono froze.
Yeah.
Let's take one of
Row.
those. Okay, I'll figure it out.
Okay. Well, let's keep going. Now, if you look very carefully here, preview is also only accepting the boundaries of my render region. So I'm only getting an update here, and this is a pretty good indication as to what is going to actually get rendered itself. So render regions, I can't recommend this enough, okay? Yeah, it's pretty great. Now, my memory is telling me that there is another way. So if, without that compare and contrast window, Meredith, I believe you can get the exact same thing. Yeah. So in the actual render item itself, there is a region section. Yeah, so you can turn it on, and you can do the exact same thing. Okay. So render regions, can't recommend these enough. This is going to save your sanity as you make a zillion little changes to your scenes, okay? Now, I'm pretty happy with the quality of my volumetric lights. If you do want to increase the quality for whatever reason, you certainly could start marching this samples value up a little bit. I wouldn't go too nuts with it though, okay? Because you start getting over 100, and you're going to find that your render times are going to spike. With all things computer graphics, there's a balance that you're trying to find between the quality and the render time that produces that quality, right? You know, if we can do this intelligently, we can march through this and understand what's the culprit and what is actually influencing the render and what's not. All right. So I'm really digging this. This is a really cool light source that's coming in through the scene. I'm pretty stoked with it. However, maybe there's a couple things that we want to start changing here, okay? Specifically, yeah, let me just look at this. Actually, you know what? I'm going to keep it as is for the time being. This is starting to look pretty good. The only other change that I want to make to my directional light is that I want to increase the spread angle to like 2 degrees. The spread angle on directional lights are going to blur the shadows ever so slightly, okay? And it's going to give you a little bit more of a photographic look with directional lights. If you look very carefully at the shadows in the background, so this right here, this is the shadow from one of the rails on my windows. It's coming from the directional light, okay? With the spread angle at 2 degrees, you can see that that shadow has a nice little kind of soft fall off. With it at 0 degrees, that shadow is very crisp and very defined, okay? Crisp shadows like this are hallmarks of computer graphics, of computer-generated elements, okay? So by changing the spread angle to like 1 or 2 degrees, we're starting to craft a result that looks a little bit more photographic versus computer-generated, okay? All right, I'm pleased with that. And now we can start illuminating our light. However, we have some challenges on our light that we really need to speak very directly to, okay? Now, I want to illuminate my fan. I'm sorry, I said a light a second ago. I want to illuminate my fan, but I need to be careful. I want to be able to control how this illumination is influencing the total scene itself. Because ideally, the goal is to make it look like the fan is lit by the light coming through the window, okay? So I don't want it to look as though there is some dude holding a flashlight, pointed at the fan, okay? I want it to look like the entire fan is being illuminated exclusively by the light coming through the window itself. A challenge that we need to overcome, okay? Specifically, we need to overcome how the table is being lit, how the 3 or 4 lights that we're going to use for the fan are going to work together as a unit. And we're going to talk, and in doing so, it's going to give us an opportunity to talk about light linking. And this isn't something that we talked about last time when we examined our lighting. Light linking allows you to tell the computer that certain items are only going to be illuminated and controlled by certain lights, okay? I'm basically going to create a light just for the fan, and I'm going to have that light not illuminate anything else inside the scene so I can control it. As 3D artists, we kind of have to be control freaks to a certain degree, okay? It's at times a difficult art form to get into because the computer's doing so much for us. Light linking allows us to get laser focused as to what lights are doing what inside the scene, right? So let's do it. I think I'm going to use some point lights to illuminate my fan here. We don't want to use area lights. Last time we talked a lot about area lights, and they're great. However, area lights are a member of the global illumination system, which we're trying to avoid, okay? Global illumination should only be turned on after we completely illuminate our foreground subjects with direct light sources. It's faster, it's more efficient. Direct light sources are going to feed a tremendous amount of data into the rendering engine, okay? So we want to do as much with direct light sources as we can, and then the indirect lighting will kind of fill in the shadows and kind of unify all the items inside the scene. So I want to use some point lights. I love point lights. Point lights are great. Point lights don't get enough love, so let's put some point lights in here. This first light, let's just add the point light. There it is. It's for point light, and let's give it a good name. So this is going to be fan. This is going to be the key light. Okay, let's position it, because right now it's inside the fan. There it is. There's my point light. Okay, and I'm going to put it kind of over here. Yeah, now we're talking. Let's make it a little bit brighter. Let's double its intensity. Yeah, somewhere right around in there, I think. Now, what I'm looking at, what I'm looking at here is that I'm looking at how this front disc is being illuminated by the point light itself. I don't care too much about the table at the moment. I'm just looking at the fan. I want to see how this one point light is illuminating the entirety of my fan. We're going in the right direction here. I want to move this point light up a little bit. Maybe get rid of some of those odd shadows. There we go. Make my key light a little bit brighter. I'm trying to match the intensity of the light coming in out of the window. Yeah, there we go. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. However, this one light, and let's make it a nice yellow color as well. Same color temperature as the light coming through the window. If we look at what the computer has crafted for us, there's some good things in here. We're actually doing some good work, but we're also creating some problems as well. This is welcome to computer graphics, by the way. You solve one problem, and then you create like 3 more, right? So the problem that I just solved is the table and this wall over here, right? Now, the point light that's illuminating my fan is generally pretty close to the table, right? Generally. In our three-dimensional scene, it's very close to the table. And it's illuminating the table differently and not at the correct rate from what the illusion from the light coming through the windows is. Does that make sense? Point being, the table is way too bright in relationship to the sun coming in and out of the windows, okay? So I like the illumination that this light is giving me on my fan. Hate what it's doing to my table. Like big thumbs down. I need to change this. Thus enter light linking. Because I want to tell the computer that this new point light is only going to illuminate the fan. To do this, we have to create a group. And creating groups inside of Modo is wicked, wicked easy. It requires us to go over into the modeling tab to do so. The modeling layout, excuse me, I'm sorry. And it's up here at the top. We have a groups section, okay? Now, this group, I think I've already created a group in this particular one, but this is how you do it. Actually, let's just get rid of this group. All right, so we need to create a group. Now, I need to find all of the items. So cord, paper, fan, and fan blades. Those are the 4 items that construct my fan, okay? We need to select these items in our item list, and then we can create a group from them in the Groups tab. So new group. I'm just going to call this fan parts. Type is always going to be standard, and we're going to use the selected items to generate and populate this group. Is that okay? What's cool about groups inside of Modo is that you get a little plus sign. You can see the members of the group, which is kind of neat. Okay? This is going to come back into play immediately. Let's run over to the Render tab again. and start establishing this light linking. So step number one with light linking is that we have to create a group first, okay? I want this to tell the computer that the point light, which I've named fan/key, is going to accept the illumination of the members of the fan group, okay? Or I said that backwards. It's only going to illuminate the fan group, okay? Let's do it real fast. It's really easy to do this. There's just one thing that we got to do. So I got my point light selected. And then down in my properties here, we have a section called light linking. Okay? So two-step dance that we need to do. The first step is we need to turn it on. Okay? The second thing we have to do is we have to tell the computer which group to use. In my case, it's called fan parts. Okay? And then we either get to include or exclude the contents of that group from being illuminated by the scene. Now, right now, if you think about it, it's set to exclude. So that point light is excluding the members of the fan parts group from being illuminated, right? What do we want to have? Look what we get. That point light is lighting the table. It's lighting the back wall. We don't want that, right? We want the point light to just be illuminating the fan, okay? So I need to flip my mode from exclude to include, okay? So we want to include the members of the group to this light. Boom. And now we're getting there, okay? Now we're filtering the scene based off of the light linking, okay? This light is only illuminating the fan. It's no longer getting the table. It's no longer getting that back wall, okay? Now we have something we can control. So I want to be able to illuminate the table and light the table a little bit differently, okay? All right, looking pretty good. I'm digging this. Let's do it one more time, because now that we have the key light side done, I need to start establishing the fill side, because this is way too dark. And I think the power of turning off the GI system is seen quite wonderfully in this example. When there isn't a direct light source illuminating the items in our scene, it goes black or very, very dark. Okay, I want to get some illumination on the screen right side of my fan, so I need a light to do that. And it should come to no one's surprise that a point light's going to be my jam. Let's just do it again. I'm going to grab my light. Control D duplicates an item inside of Modo. So now I have two of them. Look, there it is. Okay, now aesthetically, we're kind of getting what we want here. However, we have some big problems, okay? Let's talk about what these problems are. First and foremost, let's look at the tonal, the shift of tonal values across the front of my little fan here. It's not so hot. Now it's completely evenly lit. It's all washed out. Problem I need to change, or a problem I need to fix, right? I want to have the screen left side be bright, the screen right side be darker, not black, just darker, okay? You always want to have some illumination on these opposite sides, just to see a little detail. We should never be, we want to try to avoid pure white and pure black in our renders as much as we can. We want to have a little bit of detail in there, okay? In addition, we also have some weirdness happening kind of on the throat of our fan here from the shadows that are being created, right? One shadow, the shadow being created from the key light is being canceled out by the fill light and vice versa. And what we are left with is this weird pattern right in here and down over here. That's not real, and it's breaking the illusion quite instantly. In addition, whenever we add a light to our scene, we add a shadow, but we also add another specular highlight, okay? And we can see that pretty clearly on the center disk of my fan. Check it out. Here we have a new specular highlight on this side. Where's that one coming from? The fill light, yeah. So I have a shadow and a specular highlight that's created whenever I add a new light into the scene. So there's three things that we have to fix when we hang the second light inside of our scene. We've got to fix the brightness of it to get a shift in tonal value. I have to change the shadow, and I have to get rid of that specular highlight. Let's do it. It's really easy. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to, let's do this. Let's get rid of the shadow and the specular highlight first, because that's the low-hanging fruit. That's the easy bits in all of this. Okay. So this is my fill light. Okay. So on my fill light, check it out. Let's just go into my point light properties here. Under the shadow type, right now it's set to ray trace. But check it out. We can put it to none. Yeah. And now this light isn't going to create a shadow inside the scene. Yep, there it is. Now we're no longer getting that mess down over here at the base of my light. I like that. So here it was what it looked like before. Yeah. So this is with the competing shadows. And here's with it off. Now we're starting to get a little bit more clarity in the shadows being created on the interior shadows of my fan. So that's the low-hanging fruit, disabling the shadows over here. Now the getting rid of the specular highlight also is easy, but we have to go examine the material that's associated with this light. So all of our materials are found in our shader tree. Each light gets its own material as well. So this is why we name our lights. Here's the fan fill light. Here's its associated material. In a simple examination of the light properties, check it out, effect specular. If we put this to 0, we're going to eliminate the second specular highlight coming off of this light source. Let's put it to 0. Check it out, it's gone. Yay! Okay. Ideally, we want to have one shadow and one specular highlight for everything that we do. And now we're starting to look a little bit more photographic, which is pretty cool. Okay. Now, the last thing that we need to do is get the brightness kind of where we want it to be, because both the fan, the key, and the fill light have the same brightness. Okay. So I'm on my fill light. Let's just half this. Let's just see what we get. Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm digging it. That's starting to work pretty well. Let's get really dramatic with it. Let's put it to 5 and see what we get. That may be a little too dramatic. Let's split the difference. Let's go 7.5. Yeah, I like that a lot. Okay. Even in its most rudimentary form, the lighting setup should always be establishing the focal point of the entire render itself. My subconscious is being drawn to that fan. We still have some work that we need to do. The light coming in through the window is way too bright, right? We want the brightest part of our scene to be the focal point, in this case the fan. So before I go any further, I forgot to do this earlier. I'm just going to go grab my directional light. Let's just name this sunlight just so we know its purpose. There we go. And I'm going to just put its radiant excitance, its brightness, down to 1. Yeah, ooh, that's way better. Now we're getting there. Shoot, I even may want to drive up my key. Let's put it to 30. See what we get. Yeah, my fill, let's put that to 12. Yeah, I'm liking this. This is starting to go the direction I want it to go. All right. The last thing that we need to do on our fan is that we need to start separating it from the background, okay? Now, ideally, we want to have a rim light from behind. You guys remember this from our 3-point lighting setup? We want a light behind our objects to give us a nice, small little halo around the shoulders of our focal point, right? When the tonal value is a little bit different from that of the background, we're going to get separation from the background, okay? So let's go ahead and put that light in and see what it's going to do. So we could use another point light. However, I think what I'm going to choose to do this time is to do a spotlight. I like spotlights. Spotlights are really cool. And then the reason I'm choosing to use a spotlight in this moment is so that I can adjust the cone angle. I can create a nice focused beam of light on just the area that I want to control, right? You can't really do that with point lights because it's just basically a glorified light bulb in our scene. So let's start shifting this light around. Decrease the cone angle here a little bit. All right, that's in the ballpark of what I want. Let's just see what this looks like in the render. One of the things that I've learned with spotlights is that you really have to crank their brightness to understand its role in the lighting setup. Their default values are not high enough. Okay, I can just barely see the impact of my spotlight right there. So with it selected, let's just crank it. Let's put it to 20. Yep, now we're talking. Let's put it to 35. Yep, now we're getting there. Okay, now we're getting there. Now, at the very least, I can see its function inside the lighting setup, which will allow me to edit it. Yeah, I'm starting to get some good illumination in here, but I want to make the cone angle a little bit bigger. Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes. This is what I'm talking about. This is starting to look cool. Okay, check this out. This is starting to look pretty good. I want you to ignore the table for the moment, okay? I'm going to zoom in on the back of my fan because this is starting to hit. I like it. It's subtle, and I apologize. You may not be seeing it on the projector because this projector kind of crushes the blacks a little bit. But if you look very carefully, this part is starting to get a little bit brighter than the foreground. Okay? The best way to really, and the only way to really understand what it's doing is to turn off the other ones. Yeah. Okay, so that's what the rim light's doing. And this is starting to look pretty good. I'm happy with it. However, there's some things we don't want to shadow, so let's turn its shadow off. Okay, yep, by shadow. I like that. I wish every app did that as easily as it does here in Moto. It doesn't, surprisingly. And we don't want a specular highlight for my spotlight as well. So let's turn its effect specular to 0. Okay. And now we're starting to get a really great illumination here. In addition, let's also grab my spotlight. This is the rim light, so this is the fan, rim. Let's also do some light linking here because I also only want this light to be affecting my fan. So I'll turn on light linking, pick the fan group, and do include to only illuminate the members included in the group. Yeah, so now it's not doing the table. I like it. Let's turn the other lights on. Light is additive. So we'll make some small adjustments. I think maybe taking my rim light here and driving it up to 50. Let's make it a little bit brighter. Yeah, I'm digging it. Now we're starting to get some of that glow. We're still getting some shift in tonal value here. It's getting a little too much of kind of the foot of the fan, but that's okay. I can always go back in and reposition the light later. I think I may do that real fast. Yeah, that's better. I like it. Starting to look pretty good. Okay. Now, generally speaking, this is starting to shape up a little bit. However, man, the rest of our scene is still pretty dark, right? It's very dark, actually. So I need to go in and start adding some environmental lights, maybe some additional point lights into the mix that will be responsible for making my table look the way I want it to look, maybe get some illumination on that back wall as well. I'm going to do this with point lights. Okay, so this is going to be the table light. Let's get this working. Now I'm putting this kind of over at the edge of the table a little bit, because remember, I'm trying to suggest that this light, yep, now we're getting there, that this is the light coming in from the windows. Okay, earlier when it was just the directional light, or excuse me, just the key light, it was just super illuminating that table. It was making it brighter than I wanted it. This is actually kind of really close to what I want it to look like. Okay. However, let's see here. If if I turned it on and off, yeah, no, this is looking good. Is it super affecting my fan? Well, the only way to know for sure, nope, it's not getting my fan that much at all. It's just doing the table, which is what I want. It's getting the fan a little bit, that's okay. If I really didn't want it to be doing the fan, I could always establish some light linking in here. Let's just do it. Fan parts, and we'll do exclude the fan this time. Yeah, so you have some control over this if you'd like. Let's also change the color. Change the exact same color value as the light coming through the window to make it a little bit more integrated. Yeah, and now we're starting to get there. One more light, okay? One more light, because now we've lit the table. Let's start lighting the background a little bit more, and this is where we get to have a whole lot of fun. I want to add in another point light into the mix. Not a portal light, sorry. Point light. And this is one is going to go in the background. I want to use this light to motivate some other light source inside of my room. Maybe there's a table lamp, or maybe some other window inside the scene that is casting some illumination on that back wall. Okay. Let's give it a fun color. I think I want to make it really orangey. Maybe like a tungsten lamp. That's a light bulb. And I'm going to move it so it's just slightly off frame. Let's make it brighter. Let's make it 10. Brightness of 10. Oh yeah, look at that. How cool is that? That's starting to look pretty good. Let's take a look at it. Yeah, that's starting to look really rad. Okay. That one off-camera light's getting a little bit of an orange glow from the boundaries of my frame here. It's also picking up a little bit on the reflections on the wire cage of my fan on the back, as it would, okay? And it's giving us a lot of direct illumination rays for the background of my scene. We want to try to light as much of the scene as we can with direct light sources. We don't want to leverage the power of the indirect lighting system yet, okay? If we can get as much coverage with direct lighting, we're there. We're there. That's the goal. That's the goal, okay? The render engines, all render engines are built for direct light sources. The technology for indirect is just to kind of fill in the shadows and start integrating all of this, okay? Not to provide general illumination inside the scene. So this is starting to look pretty hot. I like it very much, okay? At this point, let's fire off a render. Full render, let's see what we get. I know from my experience working in motive that volumetrics take some time to render. We don't have that time, especially considered that we spent 30, almost 40 minutes, unfortunately, outside for our fire alarm. So I'm going to render it as if maybe, well, I got to fix that now. But let's, with the light rays off, let's see how fast it takes to render. Okay. And I think you're going to be blown away at the difference in render times when it comes to rendering with direct light sources versus rendering with indirect light sources. We're going to do the exact same scene. There's no magic here. This is direct. We'll do indirect next, and we'll compare and contrast the quality between them. Actually, to get a true comparison of the quality, I have to do one thing. I forgot to turn on the visibility of my environments. There we go. Now the environments are just visible. Now we can render. So that window is going to that window is going to create a gigantic black hole, and it won't be a true apples to apples comparison if I didn't have the background environment on. And that background environment out the window, that's just a reflection map. It's nothing anything fancy. It's literally just one of the Moto presets, one of the outside Moto presets. Okay. Geometrically, this scene is pretty light. There's not a lot of geometry in here. There's only 524,000 polygons. That's nothing. That's nothing. Okay. We only have to really start considering the weight of the scene when we get into the billions of polygons. When you're rendering a billion polygons, then you go, maybe geometrically we should start pulling back a little bit. Moto does a fantastic job of rendering heavy geometric scenes. All right, we've already spent a minute rendering this thing. I'm going to guess that it's going to be right around the 3-minute mark. That's my guess. Okay. When you're rendering these frames, you want to be cognizant of how long it's going to take to render all this stuff out. Now, you guys are just making 3 still images for your final project in here. So you could absolutely commit 20 minutes or so to a render. That's not uncommon. Not uncommon at all. This morning for my advanced class, we were talking about some strategies on how to make these renders go a lot faster for animation. Because when you're rendering out an animated sequence, you're not rendering out just one frame. In the context of GCOM 410, they're going to be rendering out 720. So a 20-minute a frame render now becomes something that's impossible to do with the remaining time left in the semester, right? You want to do the math real fast? It's pretty entertaining. All right, so if it takes 20 minutes to render one frame, and we have 720 of these things to do, right? For their final project, about 30 seconds. So 14,400 minutes to render out their final project. That's how many hours is that? Let's divide that by 60. It's 240 hours. That's 10 days of rendering. 10 days of rendering. If it takes 20 minutes to render one of your animation frames, you basically need to start rendering today. Yeah. If you're one of my advanced students, you guys, you're only rendering out 3 images, so you can devote an hour to rendering. That's no problem over the next week and a half. But this is information that we need to be very aware of. Spending a couple hours testing your renders and optimizing your renders is going to be worth it in the long run. It did get slower, and it probably is because I walked away from it for a second. It is like watching paint dry, is it not? Okay, so as a moment of comparison, because I don't want to sit here and wait another 2 minutes or so to render, let's just abort it. I know, I'm being impatient. It's that fire alarm that hit earlier. I want to make sure you guys get some time to work on your projects today, I really do. All right, let's see. See if that one small change made an impact on our render. Yep, there we go. I basically turned off this environment from being fed into the refraction engine of the rendering engine. What's the best way to speed up a render? So easy, it's hard.
What's it? Don't you just click on it? I mean, I just when I figured it out, you basically get your mouse and you swipe over it. Right?
In preview, yeah, that's a great way to test things. But when you're actually doing a render,
No.
what's the best way to speed up your renders?
Abort.
No, never abort, right? Just to get a faster computer. The Moto renderer is a CPU-based renderer, right? So it's not using the resources of your graphics card to draw the image itself. So faster machines will render these things faster. We're crunching a lot of numbers here, or the computer is crunching a lot of numbers and a lot of math to draw the pixels. So if you have a faster machine, or a machine that's got a lot of processors on it, more cores, this will get rendered much faster. I remember watching a tech demo once of someone that had like a 24-core machine or something like that. And they had 24 of those little buckets all going all over the image. It was cool. Xeon processors are also encouraged. If you have the cache for Xeon processors, that's pretty fantastic. You know what I'll do, because I'm getting impatient here. And I understand that this is literally like watching paint dry, watching a computer render. My wife just like totally doesn't understand. It's like, Pat, you're just watching the computer draw. And I was like, yeah, I got to make sure everything's going all right, right? She's like, you're just sitting there. It's like, I know, but it's rendering. It's rendering. Exactly. The moment I stand up, it'll break, right? So let's just do this. Let's just do a render region real fast. I want to put it generally kind of right where the fan is. Let's just render that one part. And then I'll turn on the indirect lighting, and we'll compare and contrast. You know what I have? You know what? Do I still have it available to me? I cooked one earlier. Yeah, okay. So here's a really great example. This is the exact same scene, exact same everything, okay? This is the render with global illumination turned off, okay? And it took 5 minutes and 34 seconds, okay? So this is just direct light sources. And it took, at this resolution, which is, this is high quality HD. This is actually at 1280 by 720, okay? Took 5.5 minutes. This is with it direct or indirect lighting off. Oops, I'm sorry. Here's with it on. So this is with it on, this is with it off. There are differences, don't get me wrong. There are some very big differences. But you have to start asking yourself, are those differences enough? Okay? It literally took an extra minute to render out this entire frame with global illumination on, right? If it's worth it to you, spend the extra time, but you don't have to do it. What you get, the added benefit, is integrating all these shadows in here. Look at the shadows. They're pretty dark with it off, but when you turn it on in render, yeah, now those shadows start to get filled in a little bit because the light rays are now bouncing around the scene itself, okay? And it's collecting illumination information on each bounce and is sending that back to the renderer, and we're getting a little bit more of an accurate render, okay? Volumetrics also take a tremendous amount of time, okay? If you were to simply just turn your volumes off, now we go to 2 minutes and 43 seconds. We shave 3 minutes of render time, okay, when we turn all of our volumetrics off, okay? So those light rays coming in through the scene come at a price, okay? Be aware of those prices. Now, one of the things that we're always going to be struggling with, and I have, yeah, I can show it to you inside a preview here. Let's turn off. Okay. I'm just going to go back to my render region here. All right, check it out. one of the areas that we're always going to struggle with is grain. Okay. Now, down over here in this corner of my scene, we have some legit grain problems going on, right? Oops. Yeah, it's getting kind of dotty in here, which is something that we're going to need to try to resolve as much as we can. Here's one suggestion that I would encourage you to look at, and this is going to get some grain out of here. Larger point being, you're never going to get rid of all the grain. It's always going to be there. This is not like a game engine where everything's going to be really crisp and clean. Yeah, I know, right? You're always going to have some grain. It's just part of our process. There's two basic ways of removing all of the grain. First and foremost, cranking up all of your render settings, right? By blasting out a lot of rays into your scene, you'll eliminate a lot of that grain. However, what's going to go up? Your render times. Your render times are going to skyrocket into something that's just not possible to deal with, okay? The other way is to handle them in post-production. You can blur the grain. There's some really great grain removal tools in After Effects. NVIDIA has a great one called Optic Denoiser, okay? That's exclusive purpose is to resolve grain in renders, okay? Because we spend a lot of resources trying to remove these grains. Here in Modo, though, there's one thing that I want to show you that's usually the culprit for a lot of our grain. So I'm going to select the render item. And in our global render settings, down here at the bottom, there's a couple values that I would encourage you to change, specifically reflection samples. The default value for this is 64. Yeah, look at what's going on down here. So let's just do a full-blown render of that bottom right-hand corner. All right, there we go. So if we take a look at it, look at all this noise that's showing up on the tabletop, okay? These are called fireflies. Whenever you see these fireflies, there's almost always a singular culprit that we need to resolve, and it's the amount of reflection rays that are being fired off by the render engine itself. The default value of 64 just simply is not enough. There's not enough reflection information being returned to the rendering engine to resolve this part cleanly. And that's what I always, whenever I think about rays, I always think of them as like little arrows being fired off in the scene. But on the front of that arrow, there's a really sophisticated sensor, and whatever that sensor touches and lands on, sends information back to the rendering engine, and that is what determines how the pixels are drawn. So if we increase our reflection samples, okay, let's just double it. Let's put it to 128. And render again. We can start having a direct impact on the quality of our renders themselves. I should have put my render region on the actual table itself to make it go a little faster. I would encourage you to kind of march this number up. Just don't put it at like 5,000 and call it a day, right? Because all you really need may be 1,000. So if what you need is 1,000 and you're rendering 5,000 rays, you've made your render much, much longer, unneededly longer. So let's compare and contrast. Not that different, okay? So let's put it up to 512 and render again. March it up. Just don't crank the values. That's a fast way to get a zillion hour render. Yep, not enough, because we're still getting some reflection rays. I think if I remember correctly from the settings that I had earlier, 2048 was the one that I landed on to give me a really good result. Okay, but be mindful of that. The reflection samples is something that you're going to want to change. Okay, it's going to increase the quality of the reflections coming off the image itself. All right. Now, for your final project, you're going to be rendering at 1080, 1920 by 1080. So please keep that in mind. Your resolutions are going to be quite high for this project. Okay, you're going to have to change this. It's part of the expectation that you change your default resolution. Okay, in Modo, the default resolution is 1280 by 720. So we're doubling that by going 1920 by 1080, which will give you a really good picture size for your portfolio. Questions, comments, concerns? Does this help with some of the rendering ideas going forward for your final project? The light linking stuff is critical in my opinion. You're not going to be able to sculpt your object with light without light linking.
My only question is, I just waited until you were done. How did you group it all?
Grouping's easy, yeah. It's super simple. Got to be in the model layout.
Okay.
You can do it in a lot of other layouts, but it's easiest in the model layout because the model layout gives you access to your groups tab, your groups palette. Okay. The first thing that I do, and I'll just do this with all of this jazz, okay, is you got to select the items that you want to put into the group first.
Okay.
Then you go to the groups palette. In the upper left-hand corner, we have new group. Give it a name. Meh. Type will be standard, and then the mode is from selected items. That's why I wanted you to select the items first. Then hit OK. Now I have a new group called Meh. If I click on the little plus sign, I can see the members of the group.
Okay. That's
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
yeah, it was pretty easy once I just didn't know what it was.
Yep. For a long time, and if the developers down at the Foundry are listening to my live stream, which I know them not to be, for a long time, the render layout used to have the groups manager right there. I mean, I guess you could go in, and this is what the developers will tell you. It was like, well, Pat, we put a little plus mark there to add your own tab, and there's no reason you can't add your own tab. And it's like, yeah, you're right. I got to go new tab. And they got to remember where it is. Is it a utility? Yeah, it's a utility. And there it is. There's the exact same thing. So, pretty straightforward. All right. Questions, comments, concerns about rendering of your final project? If we continue to examine the schedule in front of us, we only have, 2 weeks from today, basically, 2 weeks from tomorrow to get this thing done. One of those weeks is finals, okay? So final exams start not this coming Friday, but next Friday, okay? So start planning your own personal schedule accordingly, okay? This is not a project that you can just kind of bang out in a couple days, okay? You want to give it some production time because keep in mind, and I mentioned this to a couple folks outside, you are ultimately creating something for you now, okay? This is, if you're really serious about a career in computer graphics, your portfolio is ultimately what's going to land you the job. Taking a class is going to get you a lot of opportunities to take or to make portfolio, caliber artwork. But at the end of the day, it's the portfolio that's going to land you the job. So take this as an opportunity to make something that's truly good, okay? Something that you're proud of, something that you're going to want to show somebody, okay? This is something for you now, not for me anymore, okay? So you got about an hour left in class. Let's use this time to continue working on our final project.